All right. Hello there, YouTube, and anyone who's watching this after it's been recorded. We're recording this live. This is a YouTube live stream. My name is Matt Petrowski. I'm the developer and editor of ISO FileMaker magazine, and today we are talking with James Ramsey. Sometimes goes by Dave. You'll have to clarify that for me, Dave. Introductions. Say hello, Dave.
Hello. Most people in the FileMaker community know me as Dave Ramsey. Technically, it's James David Ramsey, so they're all my names. I answer to all three of them basically equivalently.
Awesome. All right, so I am excited about today as we're going to switch to my desktop here, just a plain desktop for right now. Actually, what I'll do is I'll switch to the chat, bring that up so we can see what people have to say as we're discussing FMPerception today. Now, I've used FMPerception, and just to start off, for anybody who's watching this video who has not used FMPerception, I'm going to go through a quick little demo of how you would actually use FMPerception. Let me open up my FileMaker here. I've got a copy of a FileMaker database. It's a little database that I use in order to store a sequence of a bunch of different snippets that will compose a particular technique or something that I want to reuse within a FileMaker database. Now, what FMPerception does is it basically will give you a much wider perspective of your database than being able to just go straight into FileMaker and poking around and taking a look, or using FileMaker's its own HTML. Now, what we're going to see here as I zoom in is you're going to have a copy of FileMaker Advanced, and it's this item right here that we're taking a look at, Database Design Report. Now, there are a number of programs that came out when FileMaker released this, and as I select this, it'll come up with this window, and then in this window, you will have a selection of however many databases are open. Then you have all of the different areas within FileMaker. Scripts we're all familiar with, privileges, etc. But there's this reporting format that we have that we're able to output. Now, FileMaker has this HTML format, and something to note actually is FileMaker is going to be probably taking this away, or I believe I saw in one of their recent releases they will likely be deprecating this. But XML is the, let's call it the gobbledygook format that some of us can't read, but some of us struggle to go in and read that. So typically you would have your database selected, you'd leave everything here checked in the report. You would then choose XML, and then you don't have to leave this checked, but Dave is going to let us know about a feature that you can set so that it will automatically open in FMPerception, if you will. I will uncheck this, and typically you'll click Create, and then it will prompt you for a location of where you're going to save that file. Now, I already have one output because I don't trust FileMaker. In fact, I've been having issues with it. And we'll open up the window to see what it looks like. Now, here on screen, what we have is I tend to create a folder. You'll see right here that I have a folder up at the top here of users, Matt, and then on my desktop, I create a folder called DDR, and I'm working with multiple databases typically. And I will just create a subfolder for each of the different databases that I'm working within. And so this FM recipes is a folder that I had created, and what it outputs is however many files there are, or it creates a file for each of the different FileMaker files that you have, and then this one summary file. So most all of the tools, including FMPerception, reads the summary file. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to ask Dave to walk us through using the tool. So I'm going to switch over to FMPerception here, and then you are going to be able to take it away, Dave, and tell me what we're looking at. All right,
okay.
So let's go.
So since I'm looking at the video through the live stream, there's about a 5-second delay.
Okay.
So I'm just a teeny bit behind whatever is actually on screen. The first thing that FMPerception will give you, that summary file is really kind of a table of contents for all the other XML. So the first thing that FMPerception does is just load all of that XML into RAM to give it really fast access and be able to work with it really quickly. So it will then give you a list of the actual databases that were in your DDR export, in this case, just one. So clicking on that one will then provide you a list of questions that you can ask that database. Very often people get confused initially because they're thinking of this as kind of a pure hierarchy. And then you get down to the bottom and oh, hello, dog.
Yeah, sorry about the dogs there. They're not supposed to be in here, but sorry about that. I forgot.
Go
ahead.
If, Matt, in the browser view up top, if you can click on the file itself, the fmrecipes.fmp12.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me go get these guys. Sorry about that, everybody. My fault. So sorry.
That's okay.
Hazards of live streaming. All right, top one. Gotcha.
Right. So if you can click on fmrecipes.fp12.
Yep. Got that.
Then we will see a list of things that we can say, give me more information about this particular thing within the database. So either the tables or a list of fields across all of the tables. And this browser view just lets us kind of drill down further into additional details about the system. Now, as we click on things, those columns in the browser view are very nice for kind of drilling into a system quickly, but they don't provide a lot of detail. I've basically got enough room for an icon and a little piece of text. So as you select each thing, whatever's displayed in that last column is also being displayed in the results section at the bottom, but with lots of additional columns. So you get expanded information. This initially popped up from realizing that very often the name of the object was not enough to isolate which one you really wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So you can either use single clicks in the top in the browser, or double clicking on an item in the bottom in the results will drill into that item as well.
Okay, so if I'm let's say I'm selected on scripts flat and I'm interested in this developer startup script right here. When I double click it, oh, okay. So it changes my view up here to drill into it.
Mm-hmm. It keeps them all in sync and in line. So you can just shift to a lower level navigation and just keep double clicking all the way down if that's the way you want to work. And then depending upon whichever item is most recently selected, either in the top view or the bottom view, we display additional information about that item in the detail sidebar on the right. So providing just much more information about whatever that particular item is.
So let's find something a little interesting here, say the actual script. So the script is going to give me all of the, so it's basically giving me all of the metadata down here at the bottom. I've got hierarchy information. I can also see copy paste. Oh, okay.
So that's actually a really recent feature where I added a properly indented rich text version of the entire text of the script, just to make it easy to just copy that and paste it into an email. And any rich text email supporting system will just allow you to have the entire text of the entire script with proper indenting and returns and support and things like that. Just copy it from there, paste it into someplace else, and it can go.
Okay, now that's really nice. I also know that you, am I able to right click on these? Somewhere I remember you make it so that you can actually copy from FMPerception the script and paste it into another FileMaker database.
Right. So click one level higher for that script's flat.
All right.
And then, because the only place that works is in the results view at the bottom. So you have to get it to the point where the script is being displayed in the results. And then you can right click on the script and either copy it as the XML for that object. So you can just, look in your text editor if you want to see what's going on in the XML. This is actually the best way to drill in and isolate one tiny little piece of XML to see what's going on there. Or you can copy for FileMaker, which takes that same XML but loads it into the clipboard in the format that FileMaker is expecting so that you can paste that into a completely other database.
Now that's pretty awesome because it's like a backup. Like if I accidentally deleted a script but I have the DDR, I can actually go back and get it.
It turns every DDR you've ever generated into a copy deck for all the copyable elements. So scripts, script steps, tables, fields, value lists, and I'm forgetting one of them, I think. But value list was added in 16.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. All right, so what else do we have in here? I mean, the one thing that I know, since there's so much information, where's one place that I can just start, or where most people should start when they come in and initially see this?
Well, most users, when they start, I find, I mean, the use case that FMPerception is really optimized for is you need one piece of information. There's one missing piece of information that you need to get back to work and keep doing your job with confidence. That's what the whole thing was designed for. And so most people, when they're digging into this, they're actually going to go directly to like, oh, I want to drill into tables, then this table, then find this particular field. Now show me what layouts this field appears on. Thank you. Moving on. I'm back to work.
So like if I have a field that I'm interested in, the ID field from my ingredients table, and I can sort on these, can't I? Oh, there we go. So I could sort and put all the fields together for a particular field. Of course, I could go to the table as well. There's just so many ways I can access the same information, right?
Yeah, so fields flat is really useful when you want to know, like, show me all the summary fields in the entire system. But most of the time, you know what table you're looking for, so you drill in through a table and grab the particular field.
But I can also, I mean, of course, I can search anything here.
Mm-hmm.
Recipes,
using the filter in the upper right-hand corner.
Ingredients. So I've got, once everything's shown in the bottom part here, whether I went with like tables and those specific fields for that table or fields, I can always filter it based on the search in order to get more stuff. That's awesome. So if I was interested in, let's say, this ID field right here, I can find out how many layouts it's on. I can find out how many scripts call it, how many other fields reference it, how many value lists use it, relationships, pretty much everything.
Or just all references. It's like, I don't care how it's being used. I just need to know every place that this field is touched. For example, we're about to change this number field into a text field.
Okay.
Show me every place where that's going to have an impact.
I see. I've never even used that. So basically, I can select specific areas of reference, or if I want to see all of them, I can see all references for every place where... And now, does that apply to all objects or just fields? Like if I go to scripts...
It'll be a different set of subqueries for each object. So scripts have a different set of references and things that can talk to them. We'll talk about upstream scripts and downstream scripts. Calls these scripts called by these other scripts, things like that. And it also talks more about individual sub-elements. So that's what the fields referenced is in this script, show me a list of all of the fields that are talked to by this script. So I can see, oh, why am I talking to this field here? This shouldn't appear anywhere in this script. Just kind of these quick things that you can look at and get kind of a touch base on what's really going on in a large, there's a 200-line script. Did I remove every reference to this field or not? Cool.
Okay, so let's take a scenario where I've come into I've never seen a database before, and I've inherited it, and I run it through FMPerception. Is the, what is it, the report card? Is that what it's called?
The report card is a fantastic first stop in that case. It was designed largely around my experiences having been a developer for about 20 years. And I was a consultant for most of that. So I spent a lot of time going, oh, hey, new database I've never seen before. What is going on here? And so the use case that this particular report card is designed around is, I've never seen this system before, but I'm about to sit down and talk to the customer in 5 minutes. What do I really need to know? And so we've got, your basic numbers, the count of tables and the count of fields and rolling all of that stuff up. But I'm also trying to look at kind of a qualitative analysis and a technical analysis. So pointing out places where you might have problems in the future or things that I want to know about when I'm talking to the customer. In the fields, I break out the number of global fields. So a system that uses tons and tons of global fields might end up being a problem for me at some point. The total number of calculated fields versus the total number of unstored calculations versus stored calculations. There are advantages and disadvantages to each of those. And so I don't necessarily place a value judgment on most of these things, but these are things that I want to be aware of.
Yeah, I can see you've got percentages broken down for example, an unstored, if you have a high percentage of unstored calculated fields and your database is slow, well, no duh. That's that's a given, but this report card will tell you, right off, at a glance, you can see what's going on. Now, something of interesting here on each of these columns, everything here listed under these slower queries, why do they say that they're slow?
So the slower queries have a tendency to have to reach across your entire system. So even if I'm looking at like one of my test DDRs was provided by a developer. It's a 1 gigabyte FileMaker DDR. It's 97 databases. It's a humongous thing that they've been working on for years. But when you pop into that, once you load it, and on my machine it takes about 10 or 12 seconds to load that DDR, I can go to the list of tables and it will pull up the list of tables across every file in the system in about a second. That's fast. But the things in the slower section have a tendency to have to look across large chunks of potentially multiple files and also do additional business logic. So you're kind of setting aside some of the performance advantage of FMPerception to say, no, I want to throw a wider net. The biggest issue with those, honestly, is you just don't want to arrow down through them. You can key scroll through the lists of queries, tables, flat fields, layout objects, things like that. But one of the items in the slow section is layout objects flat. It's every single layout object in the entire database in one long list.
Oh, gosh.
So I'm looking, it's down some. I'm looking for where are all of the 1 pixel by 1 pixel web viewers in this system? You can quickly isolate those and find them across all layouts without having to look on each individual layout. I mean, FMPerception would make that part faster, but let's just look at all of them at once. Just all the layout objects at once, go. And it can take a couple of seconds to bring up. And so I just wanted to provide a little bit of warning to users that these are just a little bit slower. I know they're slower. The reason the report card is a little slower is because it has to basically run all of the fast queries. It has to run them all at once.
Okay.
And there's just, once you stack all of those up, bring up a list of all the layouts, all the scripts, everything that's going on, that can take a little while longer, but I just want you to know before you click on it that one's going to take a couple of seconds.
Because that's doing a full DDR analysis, whereas everything above the slow queries, it's all pretty much an on-demand as you needed. And then from what I understand, once you've loaded it into memory, you're caching it, so it won't take the same amount of time a second time. But if I close FMPerception and then reopen, it does have to reread it again, correct?
Correct. So effectively, the save file format for FMPerception is the DDR itself.
Okay.
I looked at trying to kind of take that cached information and store it more long term. But honestly, it just started exploding on the disk. It was consuming huge amounts of space, and it wasn't that much faster. I mean, do I really need to cache the answer for you if it takes you 2 seconds? How much time can I save you when it only takes 2 seconds to get there in a lot of cases?
Gotcha.
Other fun stuff in that report card, things like scripts. There's a section there that talks about cyclomatic complexity, which was added by some of our more technical developers who are looking for expressions of script. How complicated is a script? How many possible paths are there through the script? And so the maximum cyclomatic complexity here is 7. Effectively, cyclomatic complexity is an expression of how many unit tests you would have to make at minimum to test every single path through this script.
Oh my.
Now, the one that you're looking at is that script with the maximum has 7 paths. I've got a DDR up in front of me where the maximum cyclomatic complexity is 24 paths.
Oh wow.
That script should probably be refactored.
And
it's got too many conditionals
parts
in it. It's trying to do too much stuff in one single script. And so, if I looked in a system and I'm, again, 5 minutes before sitting down with the customer and I see the maximum cyclomatic complexity is 105, somebody's been making really, really complicated scripts, and those are going to be difficult to maintain.
Awesome. And the script length maximum, that's just telling me that's the longest script that it found in terms of the total number of steps?
Yep. As a matter of fact, you can click on that, and it will show you it'll go directly to a list of all the scripts.
Okay, with the active steps here. Now that doesn't count blanks or anything, right? Oh, I see all steps or active steps. That's your difference in terms of
the
blank steps?
Yeah, so comments, I think, can be active steps as long as they're not deactivated using FileMaker Pro Advanced. So if you've deactivated script steps, those are the inactive script steps.
Wow. And the fact that this can be copied, that's so awesome. All right, so let's take a look at the report card. I'm going to let people explore on that one. Another thing that you had that was interesting was the calculation list.
Yeah.
Where's that one at?
It's also down in the slow section.
Oh, okay.
Because it's bringing up a list of every single calculation string in your entire system at once. So the first thing it does is it groups those up in a way that allows you to target, okay, I just care about the calculations that are in field definitions. Just show me those. And so you could drill into just that section. Or you can click into the all calculations section and just say, show me all the calculations in the entire system. I want to know every single place that I reference this piece of text, or that I used this calculated text, or something along those lines. And it just gives you a quick, filterable place to look at that. But then we went a step further and looked at what else we could use this for. So I'm actually looking at a different one on screen here. There's a length column. So you can see the longest calculation string in the entire system. The one that I'm looking at right now is 11,384 characters in that calculation.
There we go. And on screen, my longest is 17,000 for error FMP.
That's a long thing, but it's in a custom function. So
And
it's nicely encapsulated. I'm not necessarily going to worry about that one all that much.
Awesome.
So another fun section is the all comment column, which is actually right next to the length. There's I'm going to call it a bug, but regardless of how you look at it, it's a behavior oddity in FileMaker. Have you ever had a calculation that was nothing but a comment, and when you went to click out of that space, FileMaker decided to wrap that in a string? It put double quotes around it.
Okay, yeah.
And it's just a thing that FileMaker does sometimes. And so when that happens, effectively, FileMaker has just inverted the calculation. If the calculation was just comment, then it should resolve to false. But by converting it into a string that contains a comment, the calculatory result of that is true all the time. And so these are spots where we've identified that the entire calculation that you have written is just a single string that contains a comment. And so I want to flag these for you. And you can just sort by that column and bring those to the top and look through and say, okay, let me go ahead and fix these.
Now this one in particular, my null, is supposed to be just an empty string.
and so I'm not going to tell, these aren't like red stop signs like, oh my gosh, you have to fix this. But I want to bring this to your attention that this could be a little funny for what you were really intending to do.
Now these purple dots, what do they, is that something significant? Like, can I double click these or do they do anything or?
The purple dots are really kind of my generic checkbox. They indicate the presence or indication of something.
Okay.
It's a valueless indication. Clicking on the dot doesn't do anything more specific than clicking on the entire row does.
So
there's no column specific clicking. It's only row specific clicking.
Gotcha. So no matter what row I click, it's just going to do the drill down in the top part of the solution.
Yep.
Now, one of the things I think that I wanted to draw attention to that I've used often is the text search. Now, was there something else that you had in that area that you wanted to make note of?
Yeah, one other thing there, and it's a little bit further over to the right, is there's a collection of columns here that did work to look at the calculations and figure out what relationships are actually being used. Okay, so there's a consistent problem. It starts with about that sorted relationship column and goes on for a couple of columns there. And it came out of discussions with Todd Geist about selector connector development. And if you have an object on a layout and you pick that object up and move it to another layout, because basically everything in the system is connected through that selector table, the relationships never officially break, but they can become very long and in some cases huge performance problems. And so what it'll do is this calculation list will say, okay, to resolve this calculation in its current context, how many relationship steps do I have to go through?
I see. And that's the max distance?
That would be the max distance. The remote TO count is the total number of TOs that have to be referenced to get there. So if you think about the old way that we used to do calendars with one TO that talked to 37 other TOs, that would flag here and go, this calculation talks to a lot of TOs all at once. Maybe you can refactor this to do something. And then that TO list column will actually spit out in order the names of every TO that calculation has to run through. So that you can look and see if your selector TO is actually in the middle of that sequence, you've got a problem. Because you're routing the long way around. There's also the disconnected column, which basically says you can't get there from here.
So I just want to point out to everyone watching the live stream and the video after the fact, you got to pay attention to this little scroll bar down at the bottom here, because there's so many columns that as I scroll over to the side here, I mean, we've got this this functionality Dave's been mentioning, but we've also got some things here that he's, it doesn't evaluate if empty, auto enter, do not replace. It tells you whether that's checked on fields, the validate only if modified, getting script parameters, script results, whether it's using the evaluate function, the execute SQL function, which that can be a performance hit in some cases. And then what are these user-defined 1 and user-defined 2?
If you open up the preferences, so like command, comma, I think, usually, you can redefine actually all 6 of those columns.
Okay.
And
the evaluate.
Right. So the column is on the column header is on the left, and on the right is the name of the function that it will search for to light up that dot. And it started as just a place to be able to override what user-defined 1 and user-defined 2 means. But then I realized that people who use a lot of custom functions would actually need to override the basic ones. So in this particular example, I've got the execute SQL column will light up if you're using the execute SQL function, or if you're using SQL execute from the SQL Sugar collection of custom functions.
Right.
And so you can have these things light up. Those columns exist on these calculation lists, field lists, layout object lists, script step lists. And so these are the things that just I'm wondering about. You know, like I want to be just slightly flagged if one of these things happens.
And looks like I can really only choose between user-defined 1 and user-defined 2 out of this list.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. But you could technically user-define any of them. You could temporarily repurpose the evaluate function. Like, I don't care about evaluate, but go ahead and flag me whenever somebody's using get right value or right values. Open paren.
Nice. All right.
One thing to be aware of is because FMPerception caches the search results, when you change these values, what you really need to do is refresh your DDR so that FMPerception can reload those query results again, because it doesn't recalculate those every time you look at the screen, just when it initially loads that data.
Okay.
Also, because you were talking about kind of losing columns off to the right, another important thing to point out here is that all of those columns are reorganizable.
So I can drag them to put them where I want them.
Right. So if right now what I really care about is looking at the longest calculation, or I only care about the evaluate function right now, I can drag that evaluate column all the way over to the right and be seeing calculation and whether it's running evaluate. I can kind of custom build a list just for me right now so that I'm just looking at the stuff that I really care about.
Now, is that saved with the... Is that saved as part of the application so that it'll show that way for every DDR, or for just the DDR that I'm looking at?
It's just the DDR you're currently looking at. I've got an item on my list for giving it some kind of memory about that stuff, but it's tough to do that and not give users the ability to completely break their interface. Like, you need to be able to reset these things back to preferences, and I just haven't gotten there yet. So while this window is open, that column ordering will be remembered.
Okay.
But as soon as you close the window, it's as ephemeral as the DDR itself.
Gotcha. All right, so we're coming up on about 30 minutes here so far. I wanted to make mention of one of my favorite features, which is this text search, which allows you to basically search for whatever you want to find within the DDR. So a lot of times I'm looking for global variables, but of course I can select on the global variables and then just select on it, and it'll tell me where that global variable, all the different occurrences that global variable is actually used. But this text search is pretty nice because it's got these 2 boxes right here, and I'd like you to help clarify on this. I'm going to search for, I don't know, ID, because that's going to come up with all kinds of stuff. How do I use these 2 together? Why would I use a search and then use a name? Do I want to... Like, how does this work? And I know that there's multiple options here.
Right. So the rightmost box is for filtering the list. That box is on basically all of the screens. And so you can just type in a couple of characters, and it will live filter whatever the currently displayed list is showing. And by default, it's just filtering on the name column. But you can expand that to say... using that search drop down to say, okay, look across all the columns. In a couple of cases, that can get a little sluggish. If you're looking at 150,000 layout objects and you're searching across all the columns, it's going to have a little bit of a delay on it, but it's still quite quick. And there's also an option there to just say, just search by the FileMaker internal ID if you have a need for that. Sometimes in top call stats analysis, you just want to find a particular field by its FileMaker internal ID. And again, that box is on basically every single list in the entire system. The box to the left only appears on this text search screen. And so it says, okay, find me all of the things that talk about, reference, or include as a name or whatever this particular string. So when you search for ID, you're not only going to find fields named ID or placement of fields on a layout named ID, but anything that references ID in a calculation, in a piece of text label, a chunk of text on a layout object, a comment in a script, anything that has the characters ID right next to each other, that's them.
Gotcha.
Now, once you've found that list, very often that list will be too much. And so I just want to say, okay, in the name section, why don't you type in button? And so what you'll get is a filtered list that just talks about like layout object buttons that have a reference to the word ID someplace.
And that's awesome. Being able to find exactly what you want to find while you're working is very nice. In fact, one of the things that I found is because all of this information here, there's so many times where I've basically driven myself crazy, like in particular on layouts, and something's hidden. And one of the most common problems in FileMaker layout is you'll put an object, let's say, in a popover or in a slider, and then you'll resize that slider, and the object is still contained within the object, but it's now outside the bounds of that object, or the visible bounds of that object. And so I end up going here and having to look at the left top bottom once FMPerception finds the object and say, oh, okay, silly developer, it's still within that object, it's just not visible. And it's so easy to lose things now within FileMaker.
Todd Geist's personal favorite use for this is he will tag items in the system with the text "do not release." So it can be a piece of text on a layout, in a comment for a script, in a comment in a field definition, in a suffix on some particular object. He'll just, in all caps, "do not release" as like one big word. And then before he releases a system, he will come in here and run a text search across the entire system for "do not release." And if it appears, he goes in, addresses that, generates a new DDR, and refreshes it. That's really the big thing that FMPerception provides, is you can fix problems and then immediately reload the DDR and have FMPerception confirm for you that the problem has been resolved. So he'll just keep whittling that list down until he generates a DDR and no search result says "do not release." And then he knows that he has resolved all the issues that he flagged as having to be resolved before the new version could be released. It's particularly helpful if you're working with a group of developers, in that anybody could tag things as "do not release," and I wouldn't know if the person who's working second shift had left something incomplete in the system and that we absolutely shouldn't release without it. And so having the ability to just make notes to yourself within the system and surface those really quickly is very helpful.
And so that's the process, is basically just exporting again, coming back to the same window, and if you've exported the DDR on top of the previous one and you click refresh, it just reloads the new version of the DDR in the same window, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And for everyone watching, this also applies to, in the rest of the development world, there is nomenclature for actually marking things when you're writing your calculations or within your scripts to do something like @to-do or @bugfix or whatever you use. This little @ thing is not super common within FileMaker usage, the @ symbol, and putting those types of comments, that's what he's talking about when he's says do not release for like Todd. So you can put like at no ship, where you're putting information into the database that you don't want to be there when you're going to ship the database or release it. You can search for those things and then take them out one by one using this tool, because this tool will find all of them across your whole solution. All right, so we're 40 minutes in here. Let's. We had a question that I'd like you to address from Eric. It says, "How is this different from Inspector Pro?" And while we're at it, why don't we also, compare and contrast against base elements as well? Because I know both of those other products as well, but I know there's a pretty big distinction between them.
I'm not necessarily the world's biggest expert on the other DDR tools. The primary advantage to FMPerception is the speed. Like I said, that I've got a DDR from a developer that's a 1 gigabyte DDR, and that takes 10 or 11 seconds to load. In the competing tools, it's at least hours.
Yeah, so the clarification there is that this is an on-demand processing tool, whereas base elements and inspector are pre-processing tools. They will pre-process the whole DDR and then store it, whereas this one is more on-demand. Is that fair to say?
Right. So those tools are great for long-term documentation, and things like that. But when I'm developing, if I have a question, like I'm about to modify this field, what is this going to touch? If I am using those tools, I am either waiting for a long time for the DDR to import and update, or I'm working on an older version of the DDR. I'm working on the import that I did yesterday or a week ago or a month ago, and hoping that the other modifications that I've made haven't pushed us too far out of sync. And FMPerception allows me to work with the live DDR basically every time. There's no substantive disadvantage. Just going, okay, kick out another DDR and let's go ahead and open this up. And now I have the answer. I have the true answer, and I have the answer right now as of the current state of the system, and now I'm back at work with confidence that I'm working with the latest information. So that's really why, like, all the upper queries are fast, and I flag the lower ones because I want to give you a warning if I'm about to interrupt your process by 10 or 15 seconds, because I don't want to. FMPerception actually loads the DDR faster than FileMaker converts an XML DDR to an HTML DDR. Oh, wow. So the HTML DDR takes longer to export than an XML DDR. And the difference in that time is longer than it just takes to export the XML DDR and open it in FMPerception. Cool deal. So I've completely stopped using the HTML DDR because it has no advantages. It is neither faster nor provides more information. Hence, they're probably going to be taking it out according to their deprecation. So we'll see how quickly they remove that. All right, so let's. We've got a few other things I wanted to make note of. I can just load them here. One of them was the script call chain. Where do I find that? Let's quickly show that one. Okay, so find a particular script. Okay, so there's a script. Let's go scripts flat, and I'll just say my startup script. Okay, and so when your startup script runs, this can give you a list of the scripts that this script calls, or it can give you a list of the scripts that this script is called by. But that's just kind of one step in each direction. And so the call chain diagram will actually map out every script that calls this one and every script upstream and further upstream and further upstream and then downstream as well. It will also add a star next to the name of any script that runs with full access privileges. so you can see how that follows. It will also put a little folder icon next to any script that is in another file. So that if this script calls scripts in another file, that calls scripts in another file, that calls scripts in another file, you can actually see that entire map. You can move this around, you can zoom in and out, but you can also click on these scripts and it will go to that script specifically. At which point, if you're really interested, you can go to the call chain diagram again, and it's now remapped from that script's perspective. And so you can just navigate up and down through a complex script hierarchy using this and get a really quick visual sense for exactly what's happening in just a couple of seconds.
Awesome. All right, and so let's see. Other things you have in here, theme and styles. You've got some information about that.
Yeah, the theme and style engine was completely rewritten about 9 months ago so that it could quickly generate a list of all of the themes in the system and where they're being used. So we've got the themes, the number of custom styles in each, and then information on how many objects are using each of those styles, just kind of all laid out very quickly. And so it makes it pretty easy to delete styles and themes that aren't being used. One caveat to throw out here is that one of the things that is not in the DDR is layout parts. I don't have any information about what layout parts are on a layout. And so because I don't have that, I also don't have any information on what layout part styles are being used. And so I can't tell you if a layout part style is being used or not. So before you go deleting entire themes or something like that, just watch to make sure that you're not using it for something downstream.
All right. And let's see, I'm looking through the some of the information you sent me. You've got an undocumented feature, an Easter egg about the HTML report card. How do I get that?
So if you go to the HTML report card.
Report card?
Yeah, the report card. It's generating a web view to display all of this information. And one of the most commonly requested features is the ability to export that HTML or open it in an external browser or something like that.
Right.
And I'm working on it. It's on the list. It's a little fun to support some of these things on both Mac and Windows. But there was a debugging feature that I added that I never removed for release. And so if you go look on your computer in your documents folder, there will be a file called tempdump.html. And that's the latest grade card.
Oh.
Every time you go to the report card, it will export that out and just stick a copy of it in your documents folder. And so you could crack that open in Safari or Chrome and print it or something like that if you need to take a hard copy to a meeting, or email it to an iOS device and you could have that up on your iPad during a meeting or something like that.
Nice.
So on the Mac, it exports to the documents folder. On Windows, it's sticking a copy of that on your desktop. So if you hate the fact that I'm cluttering those things up, I apologize. I'm going to have that fixed as soon as I can. But for most people, they're just happy that they have access to the ability.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're about to wrap up here. Is there anything you wanted to say about where they should go, if there's a discount, if you guys are offering one, or DevCon is coming up? You made mention of that.
Yep. DevCon's coming up. Geist Interactive will have a booth there. Stop by, check stuff out. I'll be happy to answer questions, walk people through stuff. I've got the 0 to 60 on FMPerception that I can give you in just a couple of minutes. I love talking about this package, and I'm happy to chat about it at any point. 10:30 on Tuesday morning is the FMPerception vendor session, where I'll be showing off a bunch of other little stuff about this. There'll be a little bit of overlap. But you should stop by that, if for no other reason than to see how much I can cram into a single hour, because the sessions are shorter this year. But yeah, the Geist Interactive booth is going to have all sorts of neat stuff on the barcode creator tool and new stuff that Todd's releasing, all sorts of web API things and stuff like that. But definitely stop by and check out FMPerception. For more information, it's fmperception.com is the easy way to get there.
Okay. So I can just go to FMPerception here. FMPerception. And that's just going to load right to that same URL that I just loaded.
Yep.
Perfect. So if anybody's interested, you can go there. I don't know if Todd was offering a discount or something as a result of this video. I'm sure we can put it into the comments. It maybe expires. I don't know that you have one off the top of your head, do you?
I do not have one off the top of my head.
Gotcha. We'll have to hit Todd up, see if he wants to see if anybody coming from the video or the stream is actually interested. And so... all right, so if there's anybody with questions in the chat, let's switch over here. I think I can switch over to the video chat. All right, there we go. And I'll bring that on screen for me. If anybody has any questions, this is your opportunity before we wrap up this live stream. And anybody watching the video after the fact, if you have any questions, you can always put those down in the comments, and we can we can answer those there. I'm sure I'll monitor them initially, but maybe Todd and Dave will pop in and ask those. Yes, Ross, always would love a discount. It is we should mention, I'll scroll down here on the, I need to show the desktop chat for that. Scrolling down so that you can see it is in the realm of FileMaker tools. I can't be embarrassed about this. It's a touch pricey in the realm of tools. But one thing I can say, it is absolutely, if you have to constantly go back and reference your databases, absolutely worth it in terms of the value that you get out of that. And so... yeah, check it out. It's definitely worth it. I'd like to thank you, Dave, for coming on, or James. I always get confused on which one I should use, but
just use Dave. Dave works.
That works. So if you find him at DevCon, go ahead and say hi. Say hi to Todd Geist. I'm sure he's got a lot of information, and all of the other people who are using FMPerception. If you are currently an FMPerception user, then please leave your comments on this video about what you like about the tool. Where is it most useful to you? How do you like to use it? And also any feedback, and I'll make sure that that's going to get back to Dave. So for those of you on the video stream, I'd like to thank you for showing up. For anyone watching this after the fact, I hope this has helped you out. My name is Matt Petrowski for ISO FileMaker Magazine, and I'd like to thank Dave for coming on to this live stream. And as always, happy FileMaking.